Whereas the same editorial also noted the congressman has failed to pay property taxes on 2 lots in New Jersey, according to the New York Post. That's not all. In order to avoid taxes and get lower mortgage rates, Mr. Rangel simultaneously claimed 3 primary residences. Whereas an editorial in the September 17, 2009 edition of the New Haven Register stated, the ethics and tax complaints keep piling up against U.S. Representative Charles B. Rangel, who as chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee controls writing the nation's tax laws. The New York Democrat may write those laws, but he apparently feels no obligations to obey them. The investigation appears to have a long way to go. The man who is in charge of writing the nation's tax laws doesn't pay his federal income or local property taxes. Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
The gentleman is correct. Gentleman from Texas.
He has such a poor grasp of his own finances that he neglects to list half his assets on a disclosure form intended to keep members of Congress accountable and honest. We can already hear the defense of the next tax deadbeat called into court. If Charlie Rangel doesn't have to pay his taxes, why should I? Whereas an article in the Washington Post on September 15, 2009 stated, Rangel is now the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee and a man of immense importance in Washington. Nevertheless, he has been busy of late revising and amending the record, backing and filling using buckets of whiteout as he discovers or remembers property he has owned in New York, New Jersey, Florida, the Dominican Republic, and God only knows where else. Rangel recently even discovered bank accounts that no one in the world, apparently including him, knew he had. One with the Congressional Federal Credit Union, another with Merrill Lynch, each valued at between $250,000 and $500,000. He somehow neglected to mention these accounts on his congressional disclosure forms, which means, if you can believe it, that he signed the forms and he did not notice that maybe $1 million was missing. Somebody ought to check the lighting in his office. Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you. Whereas the same article in the Washington Post stated there's something wrong with Charlie Rangel. Either he did not notice that he was worth about twice as much as he said he was, which is downright worrisome in a congressional leader, or he thinks he's above the law, which is downright worrisome in a congressional leader. Whereas it has been more than 1 year since the editorial in the New York Times on September 15, 2008 stated, mounting embarrassment for taxpayers in Congress makes it imperative that Representative Charles Rangel step aside as chairman of the Ways and Means Committee while his ethical problems are investigated. Whereas at various times during the past 12 months, Representative Rangel and Speaker Pelosi have made public statements asserting that the ongoing investigation of Representative Rangel by the Committee on Standards of Official Conduct would soon be concluded. Whereas the committee has to date issued no public statements concerning any expected timeline for conducting or in concluding the investigation of Representative Rangel. Whereas the major daily newspapers, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the New York Post, have called for Representative Rangel's removal from his powerful position at least until the House Ethics Committee has completed its ongoing probes of the allegations against him. Whereas Representative Rangel's powerful position as chairman permits him to participate in high-level discussions about critically important issues such as reform of the nation's health care system. Whereas an October 1, 2009 story in the New York Times stated Mr. Rangel is one of a small group of House leaders now meeting almost daily behind closed doors with Speaker Nancy Pelosi to distill from the 3 bills produced in separate committees the one package that will go to the House floor. Whereas an Associated Press story on September 20, 2009 stated, the Ethics Committee's investigation of Rangel is almost a year old. It's as much a problem for the House Democratic leaders as for Rangel himself. Later this year, when Rangel's committee considers the estate tax legislation that could expand into other matters,
Gentleman will state his inquiry.
Can any member of this body claim the privilege of the House for an hour based on something they read in the newspaper at any time they want?
The gentleman is giving notice of the question of privilege. Gentleman from Texas may continue.
Thank you. Later this year, when Rangel's committee considers estate tax legislation that could expand into other matters, the headline will be a version of this message: Tax Scofflaw presiding over tax changes. Whereas the New York Post newspaper reported on September 2nd, 2009, that a review of property records for the borough of Glassboro reveals at least 6 tax liens levied against Rangel's property during the past 16 years. Just last year, 2 separate liens were levied against both properties owned by Rangel. Whereas on May 24th, 2006, the then minority leader, Nancy Pelosi, cited high ethical standards in a letter to former Representative William Jefferson, asking that he resign his seat on the Committee on Ways and Means in light of the ongoing investigation into alleged financial improprieties by Representative Jefferson. Whereas Speaker Pelosi took the aforementioned action while Representative Jefferson was under investigation and subject of considerable controversy in the news media, but prior to any indictment. Whereas on April 2007, Republican leader John Boehner successfully urged several Republican members to relinquish their committee assignments after learning that each had become the subject of investigations into possible criminal activity. Whereas leader Boehner took the aforementioned actions while members in question were under investigation and subject to widespread media controversy, but prior to any indictments. Whereas in the wake of most recent allegations against Representative Rangel, various editorials and articles in major national newspapers criticizing Speaker Pelosi's continued refusal to remove Representative Rangel as the chairman of the Ways and Means after promising she would preside over the most ethical Congress in history, have held the House up to public ridicule. Now, therefore, be it resolved that upon adoption of this resolution and pending the completion of the investigation into his affairs by the Committee on Standards of Official Conduct, Representative Rangel is hereby removed as chairman of the Committee on Ways and Means.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized to offer the resolution just noticed.
Mr.
Gentleman from Texas.
I offer the resolution.
The clerk